I've actually, I'll leave, seeing as though we've got a pretty tight group, I'll leave the ability for you guys to be able to chime in with anyone ask questions if you need to, and I'll open up to questions about halfway through and we can go from there. Okay, so templates. Templates is a feature that we've been wanting to get into Eagle.io for literally years, just because I've used similar implementations in a couple of different SCADA type platforms, and it makes the ability to be able to interact with your fleet of assets a lot simpler over time. You can have confidence that all your configuration is consistent between your sites, and then choose specific elements which are unique to particular sites. So say, for example, there are things that you want to be the same. You may want to have a particular chart represented in the exact same way for each of your sites in Eagle.io, but you need to be able to have particular things different. You want to have, for example, the site name to be different. And then templates gives you that fine-grained control of being able to specify which parts should be consistent between all your different sites and which parts should be unique. So just to give you a straight-up example here, templates is a new feature that we introduced just in the last couple of months, and we've been sort of staggering the release of this feature just to be able to ensure that it suits everyone's use case, and we'll make sure that all you guys attending sort of get it enabled on your account if it's not already. And Ozzy, can you just respond to Paul West and send him a link to the training? You mustn't have taken a look at the email. So I've got, it's a feature that we've been staggering the release on the accounts just to make sure that, because it is quite an advanced feature and it's, there's a lot of changes under the hood. So we wanted to be able to make sure it wasn't something that was giving people trouble, but we've had some of our bigger clients using it now for a couple of months, and it's been extremely useful. What we've got here is the up the top left. Once you've got the templates feature enabled, it's a permanent icon that'll stay as part of your account, and it contains basically, obviously, the templates that you store in your account, and those templates can then be created as an instance in any one of your workspaces. So there's like a parent-child relationship between the two critical terms that we use when we're explaining templates. The template being, okay, look, this is what's common. This is the baseline configuration for my sites. And then an instance is an instantiation of that template. So it's the child to the template's parent. I think Paul's just joining us here. So just to show you those two relationships here, up the top I've created one weather template, and we'll go through the process of creating a template here in a second, but I just wanted to be able to give you an idea of where we're heading. So this weather template up here describes a location. A template can take the form of either a location or a group. So when you go create a template, you can choose to create a location template or a group template. It generally speaking, the people who are using the templates feature are doing so to be able to replicate data configuration between sites. And so the group is just another way of being able to structure that template information. So here I've created a weather template, and then down in my templates workspace, I've created 3 instances. You can see that it's actually an instance because it's used blue shading for each of the markers. And all of the elements inside an instance will also be shaded blue, just so you know that this is actually not an ordinary site. This is an instance that's being generated. So you'll notice here that all of the assets that exist underneath the template up the top are replicated identically in all the elements down below. And this makes it really simple to sort of recognize what you're interacting with is a template, but it also means that you can it makes it easier to recognize that the data that you're looking at is unique, as opposed to just being a copy of configuration, which can get out of date with each other. If you're looking at an instance, you can be confident that the majority of the configuration of the site is actually stored in the template, which makes it, again, you're going to be able to keep that consistent between sites. So in this particular case, I started off creating a weather template and then basically defining what is common between all the weather stations that I use. And then I've created 3 instances: east, north, south weather. And as I sort of cycle through each of these guys here, they're all very similar, apart from the fact that they've all got slightly different locations. So if I switch to the map view here, you'll be able to see our north, east, and south weather stations. And it's important to remember that the templates feature is there to describe configuration that is common. The actual data associated with each instance is completely independent. And I'll show you how to be able to configure things in such a way that you can pull in data to each element and be able to choose which specific elements you'd like to be able to make unique per site. So in this case, I've got 3 different sites, and they've all got slightly different locations. So if we go to the dashboard on each one of these instances, you'll notice that the location that it marks is slightly different. So even though the configuration is the same, the actual data associated with each instance is actually unique. And you'll notice here on the east weather station that I've actually already transmitted some data to this particular site, and that's why you can see some data there, and see the current values and all that sort of stuff. Whereas the other guys haven't actually got any data loaded in, and we'll actually have a look at doing that in just a moment. Something that is, I guess, just to sort of work backwards from this point, what I'll do is I'll create a new template up here. And this is, you create a template in the same way that you would normally create a location or a group. And just to be complementary, I'll rename this template to be a slightly different data type. We'll use it, let's call it a flow template. So if it was a bunch of sites that are going to be using flow data, a template called that. And then inside that template there, you create a data source, and you basically create all the objects that you ordinarily would when you're dealing with a new data source. So it uses the same wizard process of being able to define that information. Yep, we'll use FTP to push data to these type of sites. And set up some parsing rules here. Okay, so now that I've got a flow template set up, what I'll do is just collect some of these ones that I created earlier. And I'll create a new instance. So the instance menu down here when you go to create, so you'll see this when you go to create something in one of your existing workspaces. You go create, instance. In this case, we'll create a new instance from the flow template. And I'll rename this guy so it's a bit easier to, we'll call this East Flow. In fact, I might even put these into groups here just to keep it easy. Okay, so I'll stick our weather stations into the weather group. And I'll stick our flow into the flow group. There we go. Okay, and you'll see that the configuration of this flow instance here mirrors that which is currently in the flow template. Now, the cool thing about templates is that it's all updated dynamically on the fly live. So, for example, if I create a new dashboard inside my template, that immediately appears inside each one of the instances. And the same goes too for any configuration you perform in the template. So, for example, if I start configuring this dashboard, and I'll grab, say, for example, location tile here. And now I'm going to grab, as I populate the tiles on this dash, I'm going to grab data from the template. Now, even though I'm defining the relationship here between the dashboard and data in the template, when you actually view the same information from the instance, it uses the relative links. So, for example, the dashboard displayed in East Flow here will actually be using the location of this instance's location marker. I'll also create a couple of extra bits of data here that we can look at. Let's grab some humidity information, and let's grab some battery voltage information using the gauge tile. Okay, so what we've defined is basically that every instance that is created from this flow template will provide the relative relationship between the sensors inside the template and the dashboard that's being displayed. So as we go down here now to the East Flow template, it'll have very similar information. Now currently we haven't actually transmitted any data into this site. All we've done is just configure the dashboard. Now what I'll do is I'll transmit some data into this particular site here so that we can actually see some data appear in the instance. So what I'll do is I'll grab the data transmission. We've got a unique username here. So there are portions of an instance which must be unique, and the unique identifier for a site is one of those things. So Eagle.io will sort of cleverly generate new usernames and so forth as you create new instances. So you've got unique usernames. So let's use our FTP client here, and I'll transmit some data up. Yeah. And I've got a file on my desktop here that we can use for okay. So I've got some data in now into our data source. We can also have, I'll just add this location marker to the map. So when I look at the dashboard, we've got flow information and battery voltage and location information. Now, say for example, you wanted to be able to have just an example of configuration that you may want to have unique per site. So there's certain things that are common between sites. Say for example, battery voltage alarm thresholds. It's pretty common if you're using a 12-volt system to be able to have an alarm at, say, 11 volts so that you get notified if the battery's getting too low. Now, in that scenario, that information is common. There's no reason to have different alarm limits per site, which could potentially get out of sync. So what you would do then in that case is to add an alarm threshold in the template that describes that 11-volt low battery alarm. I'll move that below normal, so that'll let us know when it transitions to below 11 volts. So I'll hit save, and then when I actually go to the configuration of my battery voltage sensor in the instance, it'll have that threshold already configured. And in fact, it won't actually be editable. The thing that allows you to be able to customize it per instance is a thing called overrides. The way that works is, so battery voltage is an example of an alarm threshold or state that is consistent between all your sites. Let's say, for example, you wanted to be able to see a threshold which was unique per site. So what you could do is set a default in the template. So we could say, look, by default, I'd like to get notified if relative humidity goes above 75. Save there. So we can see that on the chart there. That's great. And if we switch down to, actually, this is our instance. That's cool. That means all the sites that inherit from the flow template will use that threshold of 75 to alarm on there. But what if we wanted to make...
I have an appointment on Thursday. I just need to postpone it, please. It's...
Now, if we wanted to be able to say that, okay, instead of being 75...
Yeah, no worries. Do you have my contact details?
You can use what we call overrides to be able to best specify specific attributes that are unique. In this particular case, what we're trying to do is specify that the states configuration, that is where those alarm states are triggered, are going to be unique. So what we do is we'll go to the relative humidity sensor in the template, head to properties, head to the overrides tab, and then one of the options here is one of the attributes that you can override is states. And what that means is that this particular attribute is going to be unique in each of my sites. So I'll hit save here. Down in the instance, you'll notice that the battery voltage sensor doesn't allow you to change or edit any of these states. You can't add new ones. You can view existing configuration, but these fields are all grayed out. A grayed out field indicates that that configuration is locked to the template currently. And the overrides allows you to unlock specific attributes that can be edited in each instance. So if I go to the configuration of the relative humidity sensor, properties, you'll see that the states here is actually changeable. So instead of, on this particular site, even though the template has a alarm threshold of 75, we'll set our alarm threshold at 80. There we go. Now, that same pattern allows you to specify overrides at any level of your hierarchy in the template. So say, for example, you wanted to be able to specify, you'll notice that on the overrides tab of each object in the tree here, there's specific attributes which are specific to that object type. So this is a location, and there's specific elements which can be overridden. That is made unique in each instance. And here we go. Here's another list of overrides that you see on the data source objects. Now, using this process of having a parent-child relationship, that is template to instance, and then using overrides, you can be confident as you sort of work through, as you create more instance based on your template. So if I create another one here, instance from the flow template, and I'll call this guy flow. So it has all the same assets, but it will allow you to define a specific alarm threshold for the relative humidity sensor. Now, the cool part about templates is that, again, it's all live updated. So as you add new objects to the template, it's then immediately propagated to each of your instances. So if I create a new chart, for example, in the template, a new historic chart, that object is immediately created in each of the instances. The aim of the game here is to have confidence and consistency and fast deployment when you have multiple sites. And you can see how that makes it very, very simple there to be able to, interact and have unique stuff. So currently the new Northflow site that I've actually created now doesn't actually have any data in there yet. It's only the East flow. So it's important to remember that when we're talking about templates, we're talking about reflecting configuration between sites, but the data is still unique. Okay. And as all this stuff here is renamed and that sort of thing, it's immediately reflected all the way through your network. So it gives you a much greater flexibility of being able to, manipulate all this stuff. Prior to this, you would have used something like, if you did have a large fleet of assets, you would have used something like the API to be able to script the process of configuration between a large number of sites. This makes it a lot easier for people to be able to interact, to be able to do these sort of things at scale. Not directly related to templates, but another feature that's that was released at a similar time is the ability to be able to do notification management via the user interface on behalf of other users. So you guys may have noticed that so the process of subscribing to alarms has typically been the ability to be able to select individual nodes that would like to subscribe to notifications for, and that is useful if you're personally would like to, be notified of particular alarms and events. But if you need to be able to subscribe other users on their behalf because they're unfamiliar with the system or they, haven't had the training to be able to actually engage with that sort of thing. What you can do now is you can right-click on any sort of node in the tree, go to notifications, and instead of just subscribing and unsubscribing, you can also manage. So you need to have the appropriate permissions in order to be able to do that, and that's part of our permissions matrix and our role-based security model. But as you can see here, we've got currently the webinar user is subscribed to those two alarms that I just checked here, and this allows you to switch between other users that already have access to your workspace. So you'll have to invite the user to your workspace first. And then beyond that, you can choose on their behalf which things they should have access to. So currently this is, subscribing to notifications on a template. More typically, I guess, you'd be doing this sort of thing on a per instance basis. So you'd be choosing the user that you'd like to be able to subscribe, and then just ticking the alarms that that particular user should get notified about. Yeah. So we've recently, been, a little earlier in the year, we were sort of engaged with handling the like a large-scale project for the Department of Natural Resources and Mines in Queensland, and using this templates feature in conjunction with the API to be able to deploy capacity for up to 40,000 sites in Eagle.io that allows those elements to interact simultaneously. So we used, one template that is then replicated for each of the water irrigation clients that the Department of Resources and Mines needs to engage with. So we use that template in conjunction with some interactions via the API to be able to do very, very large-scale deployments and be confident the configuration is consistent between all of those sites. So it means we can, add detail to dashboards, and that information is then immediately reflected in each of the instances. So for example, if we add a new tile after the fact, even after we've already created these sites, we associate some data there. We actually go down to the dashboard of the instance, and that'll actually have some data there. Now you'll notice that, for example, I can't even edit these dashboards in the instance. Like I can't resize the tiles, I can't add tiles or anything like that. That's because currently that dashboard is locked to the template. But you can override the tiles attribute in the template, which then means that each of the instances will be able to have a unique configuration of tiles. Excuse me. That's actually a double-edged sword. So while you do gain extra flexibility by enabling that element to be unique, that is, by allowing each of the instances to be uniquely configured in each of the dashboards, it also means by doing that, you don't know, you can't be confident. Like say, for example, you can't actually then change a tile in the template and then have it propagate to each of the instances because you've specified that particular element, that is the tiles, is unique to each site, so that wouldn't get actually propagated through. So just keep that in mind. It's a really good idea to set, even if you have configuration which is designated unique, that is, you've got an override configured in the template, it's still a good idea to provide, it's still a good idea to keep in mind that you can provide default configuration in the template. So what you can do is, even though, for example, I have the state threshold specified as an override for the relative humidity sensor, and that allows each instance to be able to customize the threshold for that particular alarm. What it allows you to do is provide a default. So I've set a default of 75 as an alarm. So that means each new instance that gets created will inherit that information. So it'll have that default information there, and it'll allow you to customize it in each instance, but with using that default information. Just see a little chat. Can Campbell Scientific public variables be unlocked in an instance? Yes. Well, yeah. So the process is the same. Basically, if you've got a parameter that's created in your template, then that configuration for a parameter is then accessible in each of your instances. You can, for example, so there's particular fields which are always going to be unique. So things like the current value and the current time of the parameter is always unique in each instance because, locking that to the template never really makes sense. But yes, if you have a data source that has control parameters configured, you can then configure any one of those control parameters to have specific overrides. You can just choose from the overrides tab in your template which attributes you'd like to be able to make unique. Now, I just wanted to reiterate that the overrides are specific to each element in your template. So, if you wanted to be able to specify an override for the color of a line, or some piece, say for example the units on your temperature sensor. Say for example, we had some customers who had their sites in degrees Fahrenheit, and then some who had their data in degrees Celsius. You could provide an override on the units attribute in the template. So you'd go to the temperature sensor properties, head to the overrides tab, and enable an override for the units, and that will allow you to customize the units on a per site basis. And same goes for control parameters. There's a small caveat there related to that, which I'll relate to, or specific to Campbell Scientific Data Loggers, which I'll get back to in just a second, which is part of the reason why I've been doing a staggered rollout of the templates feature. But that allows you to, so if we go down to the temperature sensor in one of the instances now, we go to properties, you'll see that all of these fields here are all grayed out except for the units field, which we've allowed to be unique per instance. Make sense? Now, a couple of other attributes which are always specified to be unique are the name attribute of the instance. So say, for example, here I've renamed these guys to East Flow and North Flow. That is because that is like a hard-coded built-in attribute specific to the template function, which allows you to be able to always rename each one of your instances to something more useful. Yeah, okay. So that's the general overview as far as using the templates functionality and being able to subscribe users on your behalf to notifications. The caveat that I was talking about with regards to Campbell Scientific Loggers. So currently, as you create a new data source in Eagle.io in the template, it will create parameters associated with that that data source in the template. Now, currently what happens is that, what you would expect to happen is that a data source that you create, it will automatically create parameters. It's kind of hard to explain. Basically, the auto creation of parameters that comes via communication with a Campbell Scientific data logger. Currently, that will create those parameters in the template, but they won't automatically create them underneath each data source after the fact, after you've actually created the instance. This is purely just this functionality, which will exist sort of probably by the end of the week. Actually, we've just been working on integrating that final bit of configuration. So we'll probably recommend sort of holding off using Campbell Scientific Data Loggers, in a production environment until we've got that extra change in place. But that will allow you to perform all other functions that we've just described in conjunction with Campbell Scientific Loggers. So, for example, all of your instances will be able to communicate with different endpoints. Something to keep in mind when you are dealing with that. In the case of, say, for example, you have 3 different Campbell Scientific Data Loggers which have different IP addresses that Eagle.io is connecting to. To be able to, part of that configuration is that you would like to be able to have different transport information, that is connection information that Eagle.io uses to be able to establish communication with your data source. You'll want to have that transport information defined as a property override so that you can actually have, so if you tick the transport thing here, that will allow you to specify in each of your instances a different IP address or a different mechanism for being able to communicate with your data logger. Same goes for your TCP callback IDs and so forth. So you need to have those overrides in place, allowing Eagle.io to change those things on a per case-by-case basis. The process of creating a template group is very, very similar. So a group is just a different mechanism of being able to logically structure your elements within a template. And actually inside your group, for example, you can have a number of locations pre-configured. So I'll just rename this guy here. This is going to be a template. It's just an example. And then that allows you to say, for example, if you had, 3 different types of locations that were all related, but and were a very common scenario that you always deploy a flow and a weather station side by side. What you can do is create a group of the locations that you'd like to be able to see, and then down in the templates thing here, I'll go create a new instance of the group template, and that will replicate all of that stuff. So it's a way of being able to deploy a number of locations all at once. And it uses the same hierarchy, the same configuration mechanisms, and the same method of being able to provide overrides to be able to define specific elements that are unique for each one of those things. Again, you can see here the group template is a blue shade indicating that it's an instance, whereas the other 2 groups that I've got on the tree here are actual concrete groups. It's also another way that you can sort of extend the templates feature is the ability to be able to add specific sensors or objects per site. So say, for example, we've got a dashboard that we've inherited here from our template. But say, for example, just in the case of east weather, excuse me, I'm a bit suffering today. There was additional information you wanted to be able to assemble specific to this particular site. What you could do is go and create a new dashboard. And you'll notice that this dashboard that we've now just created is in black. That indicates that this object here is not actually part of the template. So if I scroll down to each of the other instances here, they don't contain that dashboard. This is information that's unique just to east weather, and it allows you to still access all the data from your existing data source, but it does so in a way that it allows you to basically extend objects. So you can have charts that are specific to that site embedded within an instance that's already created. So that's kind of an advanced feature there. Yep. In answer to your question, Paul, it's anyone that has configure access also has access to the templates feature. So the only people that will have visibility into this templates element here are people that are administrators on your account. So users that log in won't see this templates thing. The templates element is also something that's always loaded. So you guys will be familiar with the fact that you can load and unload workspaces depending on what you actually need access to at the time for efficiency. Templates is one element that is always loaded, so you can see which elements in your templates are available to each of your instances, each of your workspaces. Sorry. And that's kind of a wrap. So just as a little tiny recap here, templates is there to be able to help you manage configuration at scale. And I'm sure by now most of you will be very, very sick of being able to, configure a chart just how you like it, and then realizing you've already got, 15 other sites that you're going to have to go and update to and do various amounts of clicking to be able to make sure all that sort of stuff is in sync. One final caveat is that there's no way you can't actually convert any existing sites to a template. That is, you can't. If you've got 15 existing sites, you can't convert those to this new templates feature. You'll have to actually recreate that information and migrate the data. which is a bit of a pain, but, you know, going forward, as long as you use, I'd recommend using templates for basically all of your projects. Even if you know there's only 2 sites, it may be that that particular project will grow into a scenario where you have, you know, 5 or 6 down the track. And as long as you base your initial configuration off a template, it means that you can do that configuration management a lot more simply. Okay, so we've got a question here regarding, you know, is it possible can you override a file name match to be unique between sites? And the answer to that is yes, you can. So to be able to do that, you would go to the flow template, go to your data source, and head to the overrides tab. And one of the things that you can override here is tables. So tables is basically the stuff that you see on the series tab. So each one of the entries that you see here, we've only got one here obviously, in, for example, Cable Scientific data loggers, typically they have a number of tables visible on the list here. The tables is what defines the file name matching information. So for example, if you enable tables overrides and hit save, then that element is then configurable, which allow you to specify a different file name match on a per instance basis. Okay, we're almost at time now, guys. So if you get any more questions, just throw them on the channel. And I can get back to you. What I'll do now is I'll enable the templates feature on each of your accounts so that you can have a bit of a play around. And then if there are any further questions coming up in the next webinar with Oregon, we can sort of go through them at that point if you guys hit any roadblocks. And
you have time to run through creating a new group or workspace sharing, how that complements managed notifications?
Yep. Yeah, we've got 10 more minutes here, so I'll just finish off with yes, Brad. Yep, so it allows you to have additional sensors. Also keep in mind that you, in the same way that I've extended the instance here by adding a new dashboard, which is unique to that particular site, you can also have things like process parameters. So you can create new process parameters, which are then absolutely unique to this site. And you know it's unique because it's in black. That is, it's still within the instance, but you know that it's not attached to the template. This is information that's specific to that particular site. We'll talk more about processing and the details behind that in the webinar this afternoon. But for now, just trying to give you that solid basis. One other feature which has been added recently, which is related to the notification management stuff, which I was just describing earlier, is user groups. So this is another one that we've been having a lot of requests for recently, and we've finally got that in there. So if you go to the in your account settings, if you head to the security pane, there's a new tab here called Groups, and this is allows you to do pretty much exactly what you think. Really, you know, you can have this allows you to add users to a group. So I'm creating a new group here called customers, then I'll hit save. And then when you're sharing a workspace with someone, so if I go to the security of the workspace here, as well as being able to add individual users by their email address, you can also add groups, which can make it much simpler for doing, you know, if you've got a number of users, you can be confident that they've got the same configuration, and rather than adding, you know, 20 different customers to each workspace by hand by typing in their email address, which can get pretty painful, it allows you to group those particular customers together and then just add the group and then assign that group a role. to users. And that same group configuration can also be used to be able to assign notifications. So we've got our manage notifications section here, and as well as individual users being able to subscribe, you can also specify that an entire group of customers or group of users will be subscribed to specific alarms. Makes sense. So primarily their groups is, you would have been familiar with groups and other, security platforms, I'm sure, but it just allows you to be able to provide logical grouping. So a lot of the features that we're adding at the moment to Eagle.io allow you to scale better. That's the primary, manage things at scale, be able to detect problems at scale, be confident that what you have deployed is consistent, so you don't have to go through each properties dialog hunting for specific elements. It'll give you immediate feedback showing that particular thing, because it's locked, because it's grayed out when you actually see parameters and so forth. When you see elements that are in configuration dialogs that are grayed out, that's actually over time, it's almost seen as a good thing. You log in, I don't have to worry about that bit of configuration because I know it's configured in the template, so I know it's the same between all my sites. So you get that immediate visual feedback. Righto, well that's a wrap on the template stuff, guys. If you've got any questions, feel free to send it through to support@Eagle.io. Or compliments as well. We're always happy to hear those as well. And yeah, I'll enable that on all your accounts now, and we'll be in touch and ready for the next one in a couple of hours. All right, cheers guys. Bye.